The morning sun pierced through the bedroom curtains of the Chen family home in Aurora, Colorado, casting golden stripes across Captain David Chen's uniform hanging on the closet door. At 5:47 a.m., his alarm hadn't even sounded yet, but David was already awake. A habit burned into him after 30 years of flying. His chest felt heavy, tight. He attributed it to poor sleep, maybe stress from the recent schedule changes. At 52, he wasn't as young as he used to be, but he'd never missed a flight due to illness. Today wouldn't be the first. David sat up slowly, pressing a hand against his sternum. The pressure faded. Just tired, he told himself. Just need coffee. In the kitchen, 12-year-old Marcus Chen was already awake, headphones on, hunched over his tablet at the breakfast table. David smiled. His son was studying aviation weather patterns again. The kid was obsessed. For 3 years now, father and son had shared a secret world. While other dads taught their boys baseball or basketball, David had been teaching Marcus something far more complex: how to fly. "Morning, Captain Jr.," David said, ruffling Marcus's dark hair. Marcus pulled off his headphones, his eyes lighting up with that familiar spark of excitement. "Dad, look at this low-pressure system moving across Kansas. If you were flying through that today, what would you do?" David leaned over, studying the weather map. His son had a natural gift for reading atmospheric conditions. "I'd request a higher altitude, avoid the turbulence." "Good catch, kiddo." He poured himself coffee, his third cup already, though it was barely 6 a.m. The fatigue had been getting worse lately. "David, you look exhausted," Sarah Chen said, entering the kitchen in her bathrobe. His wife's trained eye, honed from 10 years as a flight attendant before Marcus was born, never missed anything. She pressed a cool hand against his forehead. "You're pale. Maybe you should call in sick." "I'm fine, honey, just didn't sleep great." David kissed her cheek, deflecting her concern. He'd flown through worse: hangovers, food poisoning, migraines. Pilots didn't call in sick for being tired. The airline was understaffed as it was. Sarah frowned but didn't push. She'd learned over 20 years of marriage that David was stubborn about his health. At least eat something substantial, not just coffee. Marcus jumped up. "I'll make Dad's breakfast, the special one." Before anyone could protest, the boy was pulling ingredients from the refrigerator: eggs, cheese, salsa, tortillas. David watched his son move around the kitchen with the same focused precision he demonstrated in their flight simulator practice sessions. Marcus approached everything methodically, like a real pilot. "So, Dad," Marcus said while scrambling eggs, "can we practice radio communications tonight when you get back? I want to nail the emergency procedures." David's heart swelled with pride. Emergency procedures. Most 12-year-olds were playing Fortnite or watching TikTok. His son wanted to master aviation protocols. "Absolutely. I'll be back from Boston around 8 p.m. We'll do a full emergency scenario in the sim, maybe an engine failure on approach." "Yes," Marcus pumped his fist, then carefully folded David's breakfast burrito. "Here you go, Captain. One special breakfast burrito made with love and," he grinned mischievously, "minimal turbulence." David laughed, biting into the burrito. It was delicious but heavy, sitting in his stomach like a rock. He forced himself to finish it, not wanting to hurt Marcus's feelings. The pressure in his chest returned, subtle but persistent. He rubbed at it absently. "You okay?" Marcus asked, his young face creasing with concern. "Perfect, just eating too fast." David checked his watch. 6:43 a.m. He needed to leave in 15 minutes to make his 9:15 a.m. departure. "Hey, before I go, what's the first thing you do if you lose hydraulics at altitude?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Check alternate systems, notify ATC immediately, prepare for manual flight controls, review emergency landing airports within range." He rattled off the procedure flawlessly, exactly as David had taught him. "And if the captain becomes incapacitated?" First officer takes command, declares medical emergency, requests immediate assistance, diverts to nearest suitable airport. Marcus paused, his smile fading slightly. But that won't happen to you, Dad. You're the best pilot in the whole world. Something caught in David's throat, emotion, or maybe something else. He pulled Marcus into a tight hug. You're going to be an incredible pilot someday, son. Better than me. Impossible, Marcus mumbled into his father's uniform shirt. Sarah watched them from the doorway, her eyes glistening. She loved seeing them together like this, though she worried about David's obsession with teaching Marcus so young. You two and your aviation bonding, she said softly. Marcus, don't forget you have that math test today. I'll ace it, Mom. I've been practicing probability calculations. They're just like computing fuel burn rates. David laughed, grabbing his flight bag and captain's hat. He hugged Sarah again, longer than usual. Something made him hold on. I love you, he whispered. I love you too. Be safe up there. At the front door, Marcus ran up with something in his hand. A small toy airplane, a Boeing 737, the same model David would be flying today. For good luck, Dad. Bring it back safe. David pocketed the tiny plane, his chest tightening again. Always, kiddo, always. He pointed at his son with a mock-serious expression. And you study hard, ace that math test, and be ready for our sim session tonight. Call sign Legacy reporting for duty at 2,000 hours. Marcus saluted sharply. Call sign Legacy ready, sir. David walked to his car, the Colorado morning crisp and clear. He didn't look back. He didn't see Marcus standing in the doorway, still watching, something in his young heart whispering that today was different. He didn't know that in 6 hours, every lesson he'd ever taught his son would matter more than any of them could possibly imagine. He climbed into his car, started the engine, and headed toward Denver International Airport, toward Flight 2847, toward destiny, toward the moment when a father's legacy would save everyone he loved. The tiny toy 737 sat in his pocket, a talisman for the impossible day ahead. Flight 2847 pushed back from Gate B47 at Denver International Airport at exactly 9:15 a.m. Captain David Chen completed his final cockpit checks with practiced efficiency, though his hands felt slightly clammy. The pressure in his chest had returned during the pre-flight walk-around, but he dismissed it. Probably just anxiety. Probably nothing. Pre-flight complete, Captain, First Officer Jamie Torres said from the right seat. At 28, Jamie was sharp, eager, and talented, but she'd only logged 2 years with the airline. She'd never handled a true emergency alone. David had specifically requested to fly with newer pilots lately, enjoying the mentorship role. He liked teaching, like father, like son. Beautiful morning for flying, David said, advancing the throttles. The Boeing 737-800 surged forward, its twin engines roaring. Let's give these folks a smooth ride to Boston. The takeoff was textbook perfect. The aircraft lifted gracefully into the crystalline Colorado sky, banking eastward over the Rockies. 147 passengers settled in for the 3.5-hour flight. Business people, families, college students heading home. In seat 23C, a pediatric nurse named Angela Martinez was reading a novel. In 34F, an off-duty firefighter named Jake Sullivan was already asleep. Neither knew they'd soon be fighting to save the captain's life. Denver departure. Flight 2847 climbing through 8,000 for flight level 300, Jamie radioed, her voice crisp and professional. Flight 2847, Denver departure, climb and maintain flight level 300, contact Kansas City Center on 124.5. David felt sweat beading on his forehead. The cockpit suddenly felt hot, stifling. He loosened his tie slightly. Little warm in here. Jamie glanced at the environmental controls. Temperature's normal, Captain. You feeling okay? Yeah, fine. Just that breakfast burrito Marcus made me. Kid's got enthusiasm, but maybe not culinary skills yet. David forced a laugh, but his left arm was tingling now. The pressure in his chest was building, like someone sitting on his sternum. They climbed through the clouds, breaking into brilliant sunshine at 15,000 feet. The Rocky Mountains fell away behind them, giving way to the endless Kansas plains ahead. David's vision blurred momentarily. He blinked hard, trying to focus on the instruments. "Captain Chen, you're sweating pretty bad," Jamie said, real concern edging into her voice. "Should I?" "I'm fine," David snapped, then immediately regretted his tone. "Sorry, just give me a second." He reached for his water bottle, but his hand was shaking. The bottle slipped, clattering across the center console. 25,000 feet. The pain in David's chest exploded like a hand grenade. He gasped, clutching at his uniform, fingers clawing at the fabric. His left arm went completely numb. The cockpit spun violently. "David!" Jamie's scream cut through the cockpit like a knife. "Can't breathe," David wheezed. His face had gone gray, lips tinged blue. Sweat poured down his temples. The coffee cup he'd been holding shattered against the floor, hot liquid spreading across the cockpit carpet. His eyes rolled back, showing only whites. "Captain," Jamie grabbed his shoulder, shaking him. David's body went rigid, every muscle locked in spasm. Then he collapsed forward against the control yoke, his full weight pushing the aircraft into an uncommanded dive. Warning alarms screamed. The nose pitched down. Passengers shrieked as their stomachs lurched. Jamie's training kicked in through her terror. She grabbed the yoke, pulling back hard, fighting David's dead weight. "Get off the controls!" She reached across, physically shoving David back against his seat. His body was limp, unresponsive. His chest wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. "Medical emergency in the cockpit," Jamie screamed into the intercom, her voice cracking with panic. "Flight ATT and DANTS to the cockpit now." She engaged the autopilot with trembling fingers, leveling the aircraft at 26,000 feet. Her heart hammered against her ribs. 2 years of flying. She'd never even practiced this scenario. Captains didn't just die. They didn't just stop breathing. The cockpit door burst open. Lead flight attendant Rebecca Kim took one look at Captain Chen's gray, lifeless face and went white. "Oh my God. He's not breathing. Get the AED. Get the AED." Jamie was hyperventilating, her hands shaking violently on the controls. Rebecca sprinted back into the cabin. "Medical emergency. Is anyone here a doctor or nurse?" Angela Martinez dropped her book and vaulted over the seat in front of her. "I'm a pediatric nurse. What's happening?" "The captain, he's not breathing." Angela ran forward, her training overriding her shock. In the cockpit, David Chen lay slumped in his seat, skin the color of concrete, lips blue. She pressed 2 fingers against his carotid artery. Nothing. No pulse. "He's in cardiac arrest," Angela shouted. "Get him out of that seat. We need to do CPR now." Jamie was crying, trying to fly the plane while Rebecca and Jake Sullivan, the firefighter from 34F, dragged David's limp body from the captain's chair. They laid him on the narrow cockpit floor. Angela straddled him, interlacing her fingers, beginning compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Kansas City Center, this is Flight 2847. Jamie's voice was pure panic now, nothing like the calm, professional pilot who'd taken off 40 minutes ago. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. Captain is incapacitated, cardiac arrest, requesting immediate diversion." "Flight 2847, Kansas City Center, roger your mayday." The controller's voice was steady, anchoring. "State souls on board and fuel remaining." 147 souls, fuel for 3 more hours. Jamie's eyes darted to David on the floor. Angela was pumping his chest rhythmically. Rebecca had the AED open, attaching pads to David's bare chest. "Clear," Angela yelled. David's body jerked as the electric shock coursed through him. The AED beeped. "No shock advised. Continue CPR." Flight 2847, Nearest suitable airport is Wichita Mid-Continent, bearing 090, 53 miles. Descend and maintain 10,000. Jamie's hands froze on the throttles. Wichita. She'd never landed there. She'd barely landed anywhere without a captain supervising. Now she had to land a 737 with 147 people on board, alone, in an emergency, with her captain dying on the cockpit floor. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't." "Flight 2847, say again." Angela kept pumping David's chest. "Come on, Captain, come on, breathe." Nothing. His face remained gray, lifeless. Jamie looked at the instruments, at the Kansas plain stretching endlessly below, at David Chen lying motionless on the floor. She was alone. Completely, terrifyingly alone. "Kansas City Center," she said, her voice breaking. "Flight 2847. I need help. I really need help." In the cabin, passengers whispered prayers. Children cried. The aircraft droned eastward through empty sky, its captain's heart silent, its first officer drowning in fear. And in Denver, Marcus Chen was about to board a school bus, completely unaware that his father's life, and 147 others, would soon depend on every single lesson they'd ever shared. Marcus Chen stared out the school bus window, watching clouds drift across the Colorado sky. His math test had been easy. Probability problems felt simple when you'd spent years calculating fuel burn rates and descent angles with your dad. He smiled, thinking about tonight's simulator session. Engine failure on approach, he'd nail it. His phone buzzed. "Mom, gas leak at school, coming to get you early. Maybe we can surprise Dad in Boston." Marcus's heart leaped. Surprise Dad? That would be incredible. He'd never seen his father's cockpit during an actual flight. Maybe they could meet him at Logan Airport, watch him land. He texted back immediately. "Yes. When do we leave?" By 11:30 a.m., Sarah had packed overnight bags and booked 2 seats on the 2:45 p.m. flight to Boston. Marcus bounced excitedly in the car. "Mom, can we get there early? Maybe watch planes take off." Sarah smiled at her son's enthusiasm. "Sure, sweetheart, we've got time." Denver International Airport was bustling with midday travelers. Marcus dragged his small suitcase through the terminal, his eyes scanning everything. Departure boards, gate numbers, aircraft types visible through the massive windows. He couldn't help himself. Aviation was in his blood now. "Mom, look. That's a 737-900 extended model. Dad says those have different wing characteristics because of the—" Marcus stopped mid-sentence, his eyes locking onto the departure information display. His breath caught. "Flight 2847, Denver to Boston. Scheduled arrival 3:47 p.m. Current status, DIVERTED." "Mom," his voice was suddenly flat, distant. "Mom, that's Dad's flight." Sarah followed his gaze. "Diverted, that just means they changed course, honey. Maybe weather or—" "No," Marcus pulled out his phone, opening his flight tracking app. His fingers flew across the screen. "Dad's flight number is 2847. Look." He held up the phone, showing the aircraft's path. Instead of the straight line east toward Boston, the plane's trajectory had curved sharply south. "He's heading toward Wichita. That's not normal. That's not a weather diversion. That's an emergency diversion." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Marcus, you don't know that. There could be lots of reasons." "Mom, I know flight patterns. Dad taught me. This is wrong." Marcus's face had gone pale. His hands were shaking. "Something's wrong with Dad's flight." Sarah grabbed his shoulders. Okay, let's not panic. Let's just ask." But her own heart was racing now, mother's intuition screaming that Marcus was right. They hurried to the United Airlines customer service desk. A young agent with a tired smile looked up. "How can I help you?" "Flight 2847 to Boston," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It shows diverted. My husband is the captain. Can you tell me what's happening?" The agent's fingers clicked across her keyboard. Her smile faded. Let me." Let me check with my supervisor. No, Marcus's voice was sharp, commanding, far too mature for a 12-year-old. We need to know now. That's my father. The agent looked at the boy, then at Sarah, then back at her screen. She lowered her voice. There's been a medical situation on board. That's all I can tell you. Sarah's legs went weak. Marcus grabbed the counter edge, his knuckles white. What kind of medical situation? Who? Is it the captain? I can't disclose. Is it my father? Marcus's shout turned heads across the terminal. A supervisor appeared, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and 20 years of airline experience etched in her face. She'd heard Marcus's shout. Come with me, she said quietly, leading them to a private office behind the counter. Inside, she closed the door. I'm Susan Martinez, station manager. Your father is Captain David Chen, correct? Sarah nodded, unable to speak. Susan took a breath. There was a medical emergency involving the captain approximately 40 minutes ago. The aircraft diverted to Wichita. That's all the information we have right now. Marcus's world tilted. Medical emergency, captain, his dad, the man who'd taught him everything, who'd been tired this morning, who'd looked pale. His heart, Marcus whispered. Dad's been tired. Mom said so. It's his heart, isn't it? Susan's silence was answer enough. Sarah collapsed into a chair, tears streaming. Oh God, David. But Marcus's mind was racing differently. Not with grief, but with calculation, emergency diversion. Wichita, first officer would be in command. Jamie Torr's dad had mentioned her. Inexperienced, 2 years with the airline. If Dad was incapacitated, Jamie would be alone. Alone with 147 souls on board. In an emergency. Possibly in bad weather. He'd seen that low-pressure system this morning. I can help. The words came out of Marcus before he'd fully processed the thought. Susan and Sarah both stared at him. What? Sarah whispered. Marcus stood up, his young face set with determination. I can help Dad's flight. I can help the first officer. I know the procedures. I know the aircraft. Dad's been training me for 3 years. Simulator time, radio procedures, emergency protocols. I know all of it. Susan shook her head sadly. Son, I understand you want to help, but I can recite every emergency checklist for a Boeing 737. Marcus's voice was steady now, channeling his father's calm authority. Engine failure, hydraulic failure, electrical failure, emergency descent, emergency landing procedures. I know crosswind landing techniques. I know how to calculate approach speeds for different weights and configurations. I know radio protocols, ATC communications, and emergency coordination procedures. Susan stared at this 12-year-old boy with growing astonishment. Marcus, Sarah breathed, understanding flooding through her. 3 years, hundreds of hours, every evening, every weekend. David had been preparing Marcus for something neither of them had understood, not just teaching him to fly someday, teaching him to save lives, to save his own. Sarah stood abruptly, her grief transforming into fierce maternal determination. He's not joking. My husband has been training our son in aviation since he was 9 years old. Marcus knows that cockpit better than most adults. He can help. Susan held up her hands. Even if that's true, there's no protocol for. Then make one. Sarah's voice cracked like thunder. My husband is dying up there. His first officer is probably terrified. My son has the knowledge to help them. You're going to tell me there's no way to connect him. Mrs. Chen, I don't have the authority. Then find someone who does. Sarah slammed her palm on the desk. Now. Susan looked at Marcus, really looked at him, saw something in his eyes, the same calm focus she'd seen in veteran pilots, the same steady presence. Can you really do what you're claiming? Test me, Marcus said simply. Susan pulled up a flight manual on her computer. Emergency descent procedure due to rapid decompression. Go. Marcus didn't hesitate. Don oxygen masks. Announce emergency to passengers. Reduce thrust to idle. Deploy speed brakes. Descend at maximum rate, approximately 6,000 feet per minute, until reaching safe altitude of 10,000 feet or MEA, whichever is higher. Monitor airspeed to avoid exceeding VMO. Declare emergency with ATC. Assess cause of decompression and initiate landing at nearest suitable airport. Susan's jaw dropped. Crosswind landing technique for a 737. Crab angle into wind during approach. Transition to wing-low sideslip method just before touchdown. Use upwind aileron and opposite rudder to maintain centerline. Touch down on upwind main gear first, then downwind gear, then nose gear. Maintain directional control with rudder. Typical crosswind limit is 30 knots, though component depends on. Enough, Susan grabbed her phone. I'm calling the FAA, I'm calling air traffic control, I'm calling everyone. She looked at Sarah with tears in her eyes. I don't know if this is possible, I don't know if they'll allow it, but I'm going to try. Marcus pulled out his phone, opening his flight tracking app again. Flight 2847 was 40 miles from Wichita now. Descending. His father was on that plane, maybe unconscious, maybe worse. And somewhere in that cockpit, Jamie Torres was probably terrified, probably drowning in fear, probably wondering if she could do this alone. You won't be alone, Jamie, Marcus whispered, staring at the blinking aircraft icon on his screen. I'm coming. Call sign Legacy is coming. Sarah wrapped her arms around her son, both of them shaking. Susan was already shouting into her phone, "Get me Kansas City Center, now. We have an emergency situation. Yes, another one, and you're not going to believe this." FAA Regional Operations Center in Kansas City erupted into chaos. Supervisor Michael Harrison had 30 years of air traffic control experience, and he'd never heard anything like this. Say again, a 12-year-old boy. Susan Martinez's voice crackled through the phone from Denver. Yes, the captain's son. He's been trained extensively. He knows the aircraft systems, emergency procedures, radio protocols, everything. We need to patch him through to Flight 2847. That's impossible, Harrison said flatly. There's no protocol for a captain having a heart attack at 30,000 feet with a first officer who has 2 years' experience either, Susan shot back. But that's what we've got. That first officer is alone and scared. We need to help her any way we can. Harrison pulled up Flight 2847 status. The aircraft was 35 miles from Wichita, descending through 15,000 feet. Weather radar showed the storm system intensifying, winds gusting to 35 knots, heavy rain, deteriorating visibility. This was already a nightmare scenario. Adding an untrained child to the mix seemed insane. Put the boy on, Harrison said finally. In Denver, Susan handed her phone to Marcus. The boy's hand was steady as he took it. This is Marcus Chen, sir. Marcus, I'm Michael Harrison, FAA Regional Supervisor. I need to understand exactly what your training consists of. And son, I need complete honesty. Lives depend on this. Marcus's voice was clear, measured, professional. Yes, sir. I've been training with my father, Captain David Chen, for 3 years. I've logged over 300 hours in Boeing 737 flight simulators. I've memorized all emergency procedures, standard operating procedures, and aircraft limitations. I can read approach plates, understand weather reports, calculate landing performance data, and communicate using proper radio phraseology. My father taught me because he loves aviation and wanted to share it with me. But he also taught me to be thorough, to be precise, and to never pretend I know something I don't. Harrison was impressed despite himself. What's the maximum crosswind component for a 737-800? 30 knots demonstrated crosswind, sir, though the aircraft is capable of more in the hands of an experienced pilot. If you lose hydraulic system A during approach, what happens? Loss of left autopilot, left flight director, yaw damper, and several other systems. However, hydraulic system B remains operational and can handle all critical flight controls. The landing would proceed normally using the right side systems. Harrison fired off 5 more technical questions. Marcus answered each one perfectly, without hesitation, like he was reading from a manual he'd memorized. "All right," Harrison said slowly. "I'm going to connect you to Kansas City Center. They're handling Flight 2847, but Marcus, listen to me very carefully. You are not taking command of that aircraft. You are not the pilot. You're going to be an advisory voice, a support system for the first officer. She makes all the final decisions. Understood?" "Yes, sir. I'm here to help, not to take over." "And son," Harrison's voice softened, "if at any point this becomes too much, if you get scared or uncertain, you tell me immediately. There's no shame in that. You're a child in an adult situation." "I understand, sir, but my father needs me. That crew needs me. I won't let them down." Harrison took a breath and made the most irregular decision of his career. "Patching you through now. Good luck, Marcus." The radio crackled. Marcus heard background noise, cockpit alarms, someone shouting in the distance, the sound of sustained CPR compressions. Then a voice, female, young, trembling with barely controlled panic. "Kansas City Center, Flight 2847, we're at 12,000, configured for approach, but I don't know if I can." Jamie Torres was braking. Harrison's voice came first. "Flight 2847, Kansas City Center. We're adding an advisory channel to your frequency. The person you're about to hear is Captain Chen's son, Marcus. He's extensively trained in aircraft operations and is here to support you. Over." Silence. "Then what did you say, his son?" Marcus keyed his microphone, and suddenly he wasn't a scared 12-year-old boy anymore. He was call sign Legacy, and his voice carried every ounce of calm authority his father had ever shown him. "Flight 2847, this is Marcus Chen, call sign Legacy. I know this is unusual, Jamie, but I'm here. I know you. Dad talks about you all the time. He says you're a natural pilot with great instincts. Right now, I need you to trust those instincts and trust me. I've got your back. We're going to land this plane together. Do you copy?" In the cockpit of Flight 2847, Jamie Torres stared at the radio in disbelief. A child's voice. But something in that voice, the cadence, the tone, the absolute confidence, it was exactly like Captain Chen's. Tears streamed down her face. "Legacy, I copy," she whispered. "But your dad, he's not responding. The nurse has been doing CPR for 20 minutes. I don't know if—" "Jamie, listen to me." Marcus's voice was firm but gentle. "My dad is the toughest man I know. He's a fighter. Right now, we focus on what we can control. We're going to land this aircraft safely, and then the doctors are going to take care of him. But he needs us to do our jobs. Can you do that with me?" Jamie wiped her eyes, forcing herself to breathe. Yes, I can do that." "Good, that's really good, Jamie." Marcus looked at the weather data Susan had pulled up on her computer. "I'm seeing weather at Wichita. Winds 320 at 25, gusting 35, visibility 1 mile in rain. That's challenging but manageable. What's your current altitude and distance?" 11,000 feet, 22 miles out." "Perfect. You're doing great. Now, I need you to review your approach plate for runway 1R. That's going to be your best option with these winds. Do you have it up?" "Pulling it now." Jamie's hands were still shaking, but having someone, anyone, talking her through this was a lifeline, even if that someone was a child. Marcus walked her through the approach briefing, step by step, exactly as his father had taught him. Minimum descent altitude, missed approach procedure, required visual references. His voice never wavered. In the cabin, passengers sensed something extraordinary was happening. The plane was descending, but there was no captain's announcement. Flight attendants moved with grim determination. Angela Martinez was still performing chest compressions on Captain Chen, her arms burning with exhaustion. Jake Sullivan had taken over the AED, monitoring David's heart rhythm. Still nothing. No pulse. No breath. Legacy, we're at 9,000 feet, Jamie reported. Configuring landing gear and flaps. Copy that. Landing gear down, verify 3 green lights. Flaps to position 15. 3 green, flaps 15. Marcus closed his eyes, visualizing the cockpit exactly as he'd practiced hundreds of times. Jamie, I need you to set your final approach speed. What's your current landing weight? Jamie checked her display. Landing weight shows 134,000 pounds. Marcus did the calculation in his head instantly, another skill his father had drilled into him. VREF is 136 knots. Add half your gust factor, that's 5 knots. So your approach speed should be 141 knots. Can you set that? Setting 141 knots. The runway appeared ahead through the rain-streaked windscreen. Jamie's heart pounded. This was it. Legacy, she said, her voice cracking, I'm scared. Marcus felt tears threaten, but he pushed them back. His father wouldn't cry. His father would be strong. I know, Jamie, I'm scared too, but you know what my dad always tells me? Fear is just energy. Use it. Let it make you sharp, make you focused. You've trained for this. Your hands know what to do. Trust them. In the back of the cockpit, Angela suddenly shouted, I've got a pulse. Weak, but it's there. Jamie gasped. Legacy, did you hear that? Your dad has a pulse. Marcus's composure finally cracked. Tears flooded his eyes. Copy that, he managed, his voice breaking. Then stronger, he's still fighting, so we fight too. Let's bring him home. You're at 5 miles, Jamie. This is it. Final approach. Talk to me. What do you see? Jamie's hands tightened on the yoke. Rain hammered the windscreen. The runway lights appeared like a beacon through the storm, and in her ears, a 12-year-old boy's voice guided her toward the impossible. I see the runway, Jamie said. I'm lined up. Then take us home, Jamie. Call sign Legacy believes in you. The ground rushed up to meet them. The windshield wipers on Flight 2847 beat frantically against the torrential rain, but they couldn't keep up. Jamie Torres could barely see the runway through the deluge. The aircraft bucked violently as gusts slammed into it from the side. Warning alarms screamed about wind shear. Her hands ached from gripping the yoke so tightly. Legacy, I can't see. I can't, panic clawed at her throat. Yes, you can. Marcus's voice cut through her terror like a blade. Jamie, look at your instruments, not the windscreen. Trust your glide slope indicator. Trust your localizer. The runway is right where your instruments say it is. You've got this. In Denver, Marcus stood in the airport operations room, surrounded by FAA officials, airline executives, and his mother. Sarah Chen had her hands pressed to her mouth, tears streaming silently. Susan Martinez gripped the back of a chair, her knuckles white. Everyone was listening to the radio transmission, listening to a child talk a plane down through a storm. 3 miles out, Jamie reported, her voice tight. Flaps 30, landing checklist complete. Perfect, you're doing perfect. Marcus's eyes were locked on the weather radar display. The crosswind was brutal, 35 knots, gusting higher. Jamie, remember what Dad taught me about crosswind landings. You need to crab into the wind during approach, then transition to wing low just before touchdown. Can you feel which way the wind is pushing you? Yes, it's trying to push me right off the center line. Good, that means you need to point the nose slightly left into the wind. Maintain your center line with that crab angle. Don't fight it, work with it. Inside Flight 2847's cabin, passengers clutched armrests with white knuckles. The plane was being thrown around like a toy. Children cried. Adults prayed. No one knew that a 12-year-old boy was talking them down. They only knew the landing felt wrong, too rough, too unstable. On the cockpit floor, Angela Martinez continued chest compressions on Captain Chen. Sweat poured down her face, her arms screaming with exhaustion. Jake Sullivan had taken over twice to give her breaks, but she kept coming back. Come on, Captain, she whispered between compressions. Your son needs you to live. You hear me? Your boy needs you." David's pulse was faint, irregular, barely there. His face remained gray, but he was alive, barely. 2 miles, Jamie said. The runway was visible now through the rain, twin lines of lights piercing the gloom, but the aircraft was shaking so violently she could barely read the instruments. "Legacy, I don't think I can." "Stop," Marcus's voice was sharp. "Don't say you can't. My dad doesn't raise quitters and neither do you. You're a pilot, Jamie. You were born for this. Now fly this airplane." Jamie's jaw set. Something in Marcus's command, so much like his father's, steadied her. Her breathing slowed. Her hands relaxed slightly on the yoke. "You're right. I'm going to land this plane." "That's my girl. 1 mile out, start reducing your power. Small corrections, don't over-control. The aircraft wants to land. Let it." The ground rushed up. Emergency vehicles lined the runway, lights flashing through the rain. Ambulances, fire trucks. The entire airport had mobilized. "Half-mile looking good, Jamie. Looking really good." The wind gusted suddenly, 40 knots. The aircraft yawed violently to the right wing dipping dangerously. "Legacy," Jamie screamed as the aircraft tilted 30 degrees. "Left aileron, opposite rudder," Marcus shouted. "Push the left wing down, stomp on the right rudder now." Jamie's feet and hands moved instinctively, muscle memory from thousands of landings. The aircraft leveled. The centerline reappeared beneath them. That's it, you caught it." Marcus was breathing hard now, his own fear finally showing. "Now transition to wing low. Keep that left wing down, right rudder in. You're about to touch down. Get ready to flare." 300 feet. The runway lights were racing beneath them. Rain hammered the windscreen like bullets. The aircraft was still crabbed into the wind, nose pointed 5 degrees left of the runway heading. 200 feet. "Jamie, I need you to straighten the nose now. Align with the runway. Keep the wing down but straighten the nose." Jamie's feet danced on the rudder pedals. The nose swung right, aligning with the runway. The left wing stayed down, fighting the wind. 100 feet. 50 feet. "Flare now, pull back gently." Jamie eased back on the yoke. The nose lifted. The aircraft settled toward the ground, the left main gear reaching for the pavement. 30 feet. 20 feet. 10 feet. Bang! The left main gear slammed onto the runway with jarring force. A split second later, the right gear touched down. The nose gear followed with a bone-rattling thud. The landing was hard, far from graceful, but they were down. "Reverse thrust, full brakes," Marcus commanded. Jamie slammed the throttles into reverse. The engines roared, thrust reversers deploying. She stood on the brake pedals. The aircraft shuddered, decelerating rapidly down the rain-slicked runway. 120 knots. 90 knots. 60 knots. 30 knots. The aircraft rolled to a stop. Jamie sat frozen, hands still gripping the yoke, unable to believe what just happened. Rain continued to pound the windscreen. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft immediately. The radio crackled. "Flight 2847, you are stopped on runway 1R. Emergency vehicles are approaching. Outstanding job. Welcome to Wichita." Jamie couldn't speak, couldn't move. Tears streamed down her face. Then Marcus's voice, soft and young again, stripped of all authority. "Jamie, did we make it?" She keyed the microphone, her voice breaking. "We made it, Marcus. We're down, we're safe. Your dad," she looked at Angela, still performing compressions. "He's still with us." In Denver, the operations room erupted in cheers. FAA officials hugged each other. Susan Martinez sobbed openly, but Marcus stood silent, staring at the flight tracking screen showing the stopped aircraft. Sarah wrapped her arms around her son. He collapsed against her, finally letting himself be 12 years old again. "I did it, Mom. I brought Dad home." "You did, baby, you did." In Wichita, paramedics burst through the cockpit door. They took over from Angela, their equipment and expertise immediately surrounding Captain Chen. Weak pulse, respiratory distress, likely massive MI, the lead paramedic reported. Let's get him out now. They loaded David onto a stretcher, working frantically. Angela watched them carry him toward the waiting ambulance, praying she'd done enough. Jamie finally unbuckled, her legs giving out as she tried to stand. A paramedic caught her. "Easy, pilot, you just performed a miracle." "No," Jamie whispered, looking at the radio. "A 12-year-old boy just performed a miracle. I was just lucky enough to listen." The cabin erupted in confused applause as passengers realized they were safely on the ground. They didn't know what had happened, didn't know about Marcus, didn't know that a father's love and a son's courage had just saved 147 lives. Outside, rain continued to fall as the ambulance screamed toward the hospital, its precious cargo fighting for every breath. Marcus stood in Denver, phone pressed to his ear as Susan coordinated their immediate flight to Wichita. His father was alive. The plane was safe. He'd done what seemed impossible. But the hardest part was just beginning, waiting to see if his father would open his eyes again. "Hold on, Dad," Marcus whispered. "Call sign Legacy is coming. Just hold on." Private jet carrying Sarah and Marcus Chen touched down in Wichita at 4:47 p.m. The FAA had arranged emergency transportation, the least they could do for the boy who just saved 147 lives. Marcus hadn't spoken during the entire flight. He sat rigid, staring out the window, his father's captain wings clutched in his hand. "He's going to be okay," Sarah whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring Marcus or herself. Marcus didn't respond. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his father's gray face, heard Angela's voice shouting about CPR, imagined his dad's heart stopped, silent, dead. What if those compressions hadn't been enough? What if the pulse they'd found was just a flicker before the end? A police escort rushed them to Wesley Medical Center. Marcus ran through the emergency room doors, Sarah close behind. A doctor intercepted them, Dr. Patricia Acaffer, chief of cardiology. Her scrubs were still marked with blood, David's blood. "Mrs. Chen, Marcus," Dr. Acaffer's face was carefully neutral. "Your husband and father is in surgery right now. He suffered a massive myocardial infarction, a severe heart attack. His left anterior descending artery was 95% blocked," but she paused, seeing the terror in their eyes. "The CPR performed on the aircraft kept him alive. The paramedics stabilized him. We're placing multiple stents right now. He's critical, but he's fighting." "Can we see him?" Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. "Not yet. The surgery will take at least another hour, but there's someone who wants to see you." Dr. Acaffer led them to a private waiting room. Inside, still in her pilot's uniform, sat Jamie Torres. Her face was pale, eyes red and swollen from crying. When she saw Marcus, she stood abruptly. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the first officer who'd landed the impossible and the boy who'd talked her through it. Then Jamie crossed the room and dropped to her knees, pulling Marcus into a fierce hug. "You saved us," she sobbed into his shoulder. "You saved all of us. I couldn't have done it without you. I was going to panic. I was going to crash, but your voice. You sounded just like him, just like your dad." Marcus hugged her back, his own tears finally breaking free. "You did all the hard stuff, Jamie. You flew the plane. You made the landing. I just tried to help." "You did more than help." Jamie pulled back, gripping his shoulders. "Marcus, you were incredible, professional, calm, confident. You're 12 years old and you handled that emergency better than pilots with 20 years experience. Your father would be so proud." "Is proud," Marcus corrected fiercely. "He is proud because he's going to make it." Angela Martinez appeared in the doorway, still in her clothes from the flight, still marked with David's blood. "Marcus," her voice was gentle. "I'm Angela. I'm the nurse who performed CPR on your dad." Marcus went to her, searching her face for answers. "Did I get you there in time? Did the landing? Was it fast enough? Angela knelt down to his eye level. Sweetheart, you gave your father the best possible chance. From the moment his heart stopped to the moment we landed was 27 minutes. 27 minutes of continuous CPR. That's extraordinary. Most cardiac arrest victims don't survive 10 minutes. But your father is strong and you got us on the ground before it was too late. You did everything right. The hours crawled by. Sarah sat with her arm around Marcus, both of them watching the surgery room doors like hawks. Jamie refused to leave. Angela stayed too, still wearing her blood-stained clothes. None of them could bear to walk away. At 7:23 p.m., Dr. Acaffer emerged, pulling off her surgical cap. Everyone jumped to their feet. "He's alive," she said, and Sarah collapsed with relief. "We placed 3 stents. His heart sustained significant damage, but the muscle tissue we were able to save is functioning. He's being moved to cardiac ICU. He'll be in a medically induced coma for the next 48 to 72 hours while his body heals." "But he'll wake up?" Marcus asked, his voice breaking. "He'll be okay." Dr. Acaffer chose her words carefully. "The next few days are critical, but Marcus, your father has something most cardiac patients don't have, a reason to fight. That CPR, that fast landing, your voice guiding that plane down. You gave him time. You gave him a chance. Now we wait and let his body heal." They let Marcus see him first, alone. The ICU room was dim, filled with the steady beep of monitors and the rhythmic hiss of a ventilator. David Chen lay motionless in the bed, tubes and wires connecting him to a dozen machines. His face was still pale, but no longer gray. His chest rose and fell steadily. Marcus approached slowly, afraid that if he moved too fast his father might disappear. He took David's hand, warm, alive, and held it against his cheek. "Hey, Dad," Marcus whispered. "It's me, it's Legacy." His voice cracked. "I did it, Dad. I used everything you taught me. The emergency procedures, the crosswind landing technique, the radio calls, everything. Jamie landed the plane, but I helped her, just like you taught me." He wiped his eyes with his free hand. "The doctors say you're going to be okay. You have to be okay, Dad, because I still need you. I still have so much to learn. You promised we'd do that engine failure scenario tonight, remember? You promised." Marcus laid his head on the edge of the bed, still clutching his father's hand. "I love you, Dad. Please wake up, please." The monitors beeped steadily. David's hand was warm in his. And maybe, just maybe, Marcus felt the slightest squeeze back. Or maybe it was just wishful thinking. But he held on anyway, refusing to let go. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching her son keep vigil over his father. Jamie stood beside her, both women crying silently. "That boy is extraordinary," Jamie whispered. "He's his father's son," Sarah replied. 3 days later, Dr. Acaffer began reducing David's sedation. 4 days after his heart stopped at 30,000 feet, Captain David Chen's eyes fluttered open. The first thing he saw, through blurry vision, was Marcus asleep in a chair beside his bed, still holding his hand. David tried to speak, but the ventilator tube prevented it. He squeezed Marcus's hand instead. Marcus's eyes snapped open. "Dad, Dad." Medical staff rushed in as alarms beeped. Dr. Acaffer checked vitals while nurses adjusted equipment. "Welcome back, Captain Chen. You gave us quite a scare." David's eyes found Marcus, and tears rolled down his temples. His son looked exhausted, older somehow, like he'd lived years in just a few days. They removed the ventilator tube. David coughed, gasped, then managed 3 words. "Did we land?" Marcus laughed through his tears. "Yeah, Dad, we landed. All 147 souls safe. 0 injuries except you." "The first officer." "Jamie's fine. I helped her, Dad, just like you taught me." David stared at his son, confusion giving way to understanding, then to overwhelming pride and love. He tried to lift his hand to touch Marcus's face, but he was too weak. Marcus leaned in instead, letting his father's trembling hand rest against his cheek. "You flew." David's voice was barely a whisper. "I was your co-pilot. Call sign Legacy, reporting mission accomplished, sir." David Chen closed his eyes, tears flowing freely, his heart, damaged but beating, swelling with more love than it could possibly contain. His son, his brilliant, brave, incredible son had saved him, had saved everyone. "So proud," David whispered, "so proud of you." Marcus laid his head on his father's chest, listening to that beautiful, steady heartbeat. "You taught me everything, Dad, everything that mattered." And in that moment, neither of them was a captain or a co-pilot. They were just a father and son together, alive, bound by love and lessons that had saved the world. 6 months after the miracle landing, Marcus Chen stood on the floor of the United States Senate, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the podium. Behind him sat his father, David, looking healthy but forever changed. Beside David was Jamie Torres, Angela Martinez, Jake Sullivan, and a delegation of passengers from Flight 2847. The gallery was packed with media, aviation professionals, and families whose lives had been touched by that impossible day. Senator Catherine Walsh approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to honor extraordinary courage and to announce legislation that will change aviation training forever. The Legacy Youth Aviation Act will provide full-ride scholarships and comprehensive flight training to young people across America who demonstrate aptitude, dedication, and character in aviation. This program exists because one father believed in teaching his son, and one son believed in saving lives." The applause was deafening. Marcus felt his father's hand on his shoulder, steady, strong, alive. That touch meant everything. "Marcus, would you like to say a few words?" Senator Walsh asked. Marcus stepped forward, his voice clear despite his nerves. "Thank you, Senator. 6 months ago, I was just a kid who loved airplanes because my dad loved airplanes. I spent every evening with him, learning, practicing, dreaming about the day I'd be old enough to really fly. I never imagined I'd use those lessons to save his life." He paused, gathering his emotions. "But here's what I learned that day. Preparation matters. Education matters. Taking time to teach someone, even when they're young, even when it seems like just a hobby, that matters. My father gave me years of knowledge, and I gave him back 70 seconds of landing. That's all it took. 70 seconds where everything he taught me made the difference between life and death for 147 people." Marcus turned to face the audience. "There are kids all over this country who dream of flying. Some of them can't afford lessons. Some of them don't have parents who can teach them. Some of them think aviation is out of reach. The Legacy program is for them. Because you never know when the world will need a hero, and heroes can be any age if someone takes the time to teach them." The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. After the ceremony, journalists swarmed Marcus. "How does it feel to be called the boy who saved Flight 2847? One reporter asked. Marcus shook his head firmly. "I'm not the hero. Jamie Torres is. She landed that plane with 35-knot crosswinds while her captain was dying on the floor. Angela Martinez kept my dad's heart beating for 27 minutes straight. Jake Sullivan helped coordinate the emergency. The air traffic controllers, the paramedics, the doctors, they're all heroes. I just did what my dad taught me. The real story is about everyone working together." But the world disagreed. Marcus Chen became a symbol, not just of courage, but of the power of mentorship, of fathers and sons, of the extraordinary things humans can accomplish when properly trained and motivated by love. David watched the media frenzy with mixed emotions. He'd been forced into medical retirement, his flying career ended by the heart attack. The FAA had been compassionate but firm, no more commercial flying. For a man who'd spent 30 years in the cockpit, it felt like losing a part of his soul. But then he'd see Marcus, see the way his son carried himself now, confident, purposeful, already thinking about flight school. And David realized his legacy wasn't the thousands of flights he'd flown. It was the one pilot he'd trained who mattered most. 3 weeks after the Senate ceremony, Midwest Regional Airlines held a special event at their Denver headquarters. The CEO, Richard Morrison, stood before assembled staff, media, and the Chen family. "Today, we're announcing the creation of the Captain David Chen Memorial Flight Training Center," Morrison said. Though Captain Chen survived his cardiac event, his flying career did not. But his contribution to aviation, his son, his training methods, his dedication, will live forever. This center will train the next generation using the principles Captain Chen taught Marcus: thoroughness, precision, calmness under pressure, and the courage to act when action is needed. David stood to accept the honor, Marcus beside him. "I never set out to be a hero," David said, his voice still not quite as strong as before the heart attack. "I just wanted to share something I loved with someone I loved. Marcus, come here." Marcus joined his father at the podium. David reached into his pocket and pulled out the captain's wings he'd worn for 30 years, the same wings he'd been wearing the day his heart stopped. He'd worn them through the heart attack, through the CPR, through the emergency landing. They'd been cleaned, polished, preserved. "Son, I gave you my wings once before in that hospital room, but now I want to give them to you officially in front of everyone. Not because you've earned your pilot's license yet, you're still 12, but because you've earned something more important, the right to carry forward what these wings represent: courage, skill, the willingness to act when others need you." David pinned the wings to Marcus's shirt, his hands shaking slightly. "Call sign legacy, you are cleared for takeoff." Marcus hugged his father tightly, both of them crying. The room erupted in applause. Jamie Torres watched from the front row, her own wings polished and bright. She'd returned to flying after extensive counseling, stronger than before. Every time she flew, she thought of Marcus's voice, steady and sure, bringing her home through the storm. She'd already volunteered to be a mentor in the Legacy program. Angela Martinez sat beside her husband, smiling. She'd received a commendation from the state of Kansas for her life-saving actions. But more importantly, she'd gained a friend in Marcus, who sent her updates about his aviation training regularly. As the ceremony concluded, David and Marcus walked outside to the tarmac, where a Boeing 737 sat gleaming in the Colorado sunshine. The airline had arranged for them to sit in the cockpit one last time together. They climbed aboard. Marcus settled into the first officer's seat. David took the captain's chair, though he'd never command from it again. "Ready for the next lesson, Captain?" Marcus asked, grinning. David looked at his son, no longer just a boy, but a young man being shaped by extraordinary circumstances into someone remarkable. Always legacy, always. They sat together in comfortable silence, father and son, pilot and co-pilot, two hearts beating in perfect synchronization. Outside, the sun set over the Rockies, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The impossible had become possible. Love had conquered death, and a legacy had been born that would inspire generations. The end.